Hello, welcome to episode 9 of Beyond the Box Score. I am Trayvon Hastings. With me, as always, is my co host, Joey Korzanowski. And earlier this week, we talked about the trade deadline, the college football playoff rankings, but this episode is going to be dedicated to what we were originally going to talk about prior to those things happening. So, a lot of different things. We're going to get started, though, talking about, once again, another head coach firing, once again in the SEC as well. Hugh Freeze gets the boot at Auburn in the middle of the season here, which we have now seen religiously week in and week out, especially in the SEC. So, I personally like the prestige that Auburn could have to offer. They have the ability to finance a lot of things in terms of NIL and resources, but this is a program that has been basically down in the dumps since the SEC championship game when they played Missouri and Trey Mason had the 222 yards or whatever on the ground. Like, I don't have a good memory of Auburn since that time. Basically, the only thing I remember Auburn for at this point, or I guess post SEC championship game that I referred to, was Jalen Milroe on 4th and Yucatan throwing that touchdown against Auburn in a game that they should have won. So I would like to hear your thoughts on Auburn, where obviously this job will stack below, I think, the rest of the ones that are open, LSU, Florida, and Penn State. But this is still a high-level position that I think there are several coaches that would be willing to take this offer.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely intrigue to Auburn. Like it's interesting because I think in most years this would probably be one of the top coveted jobs, but because of all the other schools that already kind of jumped the gun, and this is kind of becoming a recurring theme, is that a lot of schools I think just kind of I don't want to say panic, but when it's time to blow it up, they immediately go to the coach, and it's just more common now. Therefore, kind of creating this competition. I think at Auburn, I don't really think they're going to get any of the big name guys, right? But of course, there is appeal. Playing in the SEC, you do have a pretty good rivalry game. You have pretty good alumni backing, so there are positives there. But I think for Auburn, I think you could see more of a kind of Kirk Cignetti to Indiana type move. Take somebody from kind of a lower tier Division 1 that's willing to make the move, that has proven it that they could get it done at that level, and then kind of see if they can transfer that up to the big boys in the Power Four with the SEC. So I don't really know who like the top coaches are at that point. But yeah, I think that they would kind of take the Indiana approach.
I'll give you a few names. Alex Golish, the head
Hmm.
coach of USF, I think would
Yeah.
be a fine option. And I also think North Texas's head coach, Eric Morris, who developed Patrick Mahomes, he developed Cam Ward, he developed a lot of high level quarterbacks. And right now, the quarterback at North Texas, Drew Mestamaker, had a 600-yard game earlier this year. He is also a 0-star recruit, and he looks phenomenal. So there's a little bit of intrigue with Eric Morris. Obviously, he's a little bit more on the unproven side, but if you want someone that has established a winner, I think looking at someone like Alex Golish could make sense. Maybe Willie Fritz at Houston. He's rebuilt their program. They've won a lot more games than anybody thought they would this year already. He's an option. Maybe someone like PJ Fleck at Minnesota. He's been there a while. He's kind of established them into a consistent bowl team. Not necessarily a lot of postseason success yet, but he has gotten them to the point of, hey, we're a 7-win team, we're an 8-win team, we're a 9-win team. And frankly, that's what Auburn needs first before they can focus on, okay, we need to win 10, 11 games, we need to compete for all these different things. Because right now, they struggle to even get bowl eligibility. So I think they need to find someone who could maybe be almost like a stopgap head coach, build them up, and then someone else can come and take that job when that time fits. But I think those are a few names that would make sense.
Yeah, I think Alec Golish would be an interesting candidate because already familiar with the South. Same thing with Eric Morris at North Texas, and you mentioned Mestamaker. Mestamaker still has eligibility left. I would imagine he would transfer kind of regardless. Try to transfer up. He's going to get a pretty solid bag in NIL. He's got all the arm talent. He makes insane throws. I don't know how many people are really tuned into North Texas games that much. I've watched a fair amount of them, and yeah, you see it every week. He has the arm talent. But Eric Morris, say he wants to take the job at Auburn, say he's offered, ends up working his way there. Baker, I would assume, would just transfer. So it would kind of be the same thing. Like Kurt Signetti to Indiana, he brought a bunch of his players. Didn't necessarily bring the quarterback in Curtis Rourke, but he brought a bunch of his players just with him. That would kind of be the same thing. I would even imagine with Golish at USF. Maybe Byron Brown, maybe a couple of those other guys would transfer up to Auburn as well. If they do come back. So I think that is kind of their best bet here instead of kind of swinging for the fences and going for James Franklin, Marcus Freeman, even Jeff Brom. So because like you said, I mean they are struggling for bowl eligibility right now, and that's not going to kind of get fixed right away.
Yeah, so I think Auburn's more of a long-term fix. I think LSU you can fix right away because of the amount of resources, but it has to be a high-level coach. Same thing for, honestly, Penn State, and it's not even really that they need fixed. I just think they got very dissatisfied and discontent with being a consistent 9 or 10 win team, but whenever in the national championship game, we're not consistently winning bowl games. When reality is, Penn State has fared fairly well in bowl games. They've played well against Ole Miss in bowl games. They completely killed Utah the one year in the Rose Bowl, and I thought Utah for sure had that game. And last year, they were in the college football semifinals. I mean, you can't really ask for much more. Obviously, you want a national title, but when you have the Alabamas and the Ohio States and the Georgias and the Texases, it's increasingly more difficult to get a national championship, especially with this new wave of NIL, the adopted, and by adopted I mean kind of tweaked transfer portal in terms of how it's going to operate. Now we're going to have one big transfer window towards the back half of the college football playoff rather than having one in the winter and then one closer to the spring. So all these things are important. They all factor in for each program differently. And I think for Penn State, that's their situation. Florida is another, I think you can fix it right away. It's going to be more on the long term side, but they're going to have probably more resources than I think Auburn would have. And Florida's in a recruiting hotbed, being right there in Florida. Obviously, Auburn is basically next door to Alabama, but I think I would lean Florida before Auburn, and that's that. So there's a lot of historically prestigious positions open right now, and I think there's going to be several coaches that all of these schools are going to try to get at the same time, but there's going to be those outliers that those specific universities are looking for. So that's that with Hugh Freeze and Auburn. We had a huge injury in the NFL this week, and I personally have a rant about this injury, but Jaden Daniels gets hurt late in the game against the Seattle Seahawks. By the way, Sam Darnold started this game 17 for 17. It felt like everything he was throwing was just either open, somehow caught, or just a complete blown coverage by the Commanders' defense. But I know we kind of harped preseason how we both felt like the Commanders were obviously going to regress. There were some people very high on them. Obviously, the media like ESPN very high on them. They speak very highly of Jaden Daniels, but I thought regression was very imminent, especially with the offseason that they had, the players they did acquire, some of which probably more overrated like Debo, and then others being on the older side. So this injury pretty much puts a cap on the Commanders' season, and as long as they have their first-round pick, which to my understanding they do, they could fall in this draft even farther and try to address some of their needs. Maybe they fall far enough to get a guy like Arvell Reese from Ohio State, fix that linebacker core, or address something else like Caleb Downs at safety. So I want to get your thoughts on the injury, and then I will give my thoughts because I'm very irritated with like how the injury happened and why it happened because he shouldn't have even been in the game.
Yeah, I would I would agree with you. What was it, 38-7 when he got hurt? Was it? I'm pretty sure that's what the final score was. Look, I mean, absolutely brutal injury. And Jay Daniels, I mean, we would both agree had a stellar rookie season. I mean, it was great to see him, translate right away. And the Commanders were a fun story last year. But yeah, they were an obvious candidate for aggression. I mean, think about how they won last year. So many one-score wins. You had the Hail Mary against the Bears. Just so many times they pulled it out late in the game, and that's just hard to do over again in the next year. That's not sustainable success. So, and obviously, I believe they had a high fourth down conversion rate last year. Obviously, that's due for regression as well. So, the injury luck, you can't really account for. But for Jaden Daniels, this is brutal. I will say, at least it's not his throwing arm. It is his left arm, which, I mean, obviously this was still a pretty gruesome injury, but I think the fact that it isn't his throwing arm should help a little bit and hopefully speed up his recovery naturally. But yeah, I mean, in terms of not being in late in the game, I probably agree with you. It was late. You have a capable backup in Marcus Mariota. I think the key for this is it depends how banged up he was going into the game. If you're Dan Quinn, you're Cliff Kingsbury, you knew that say his hamstring was banged up going into the game like pretty seriously, why wouldn't you get him out of there? It was kind of the same thing with Carson Wentz that Thursday night game against the Chargers. I know Carson Wentz was a little bit worse, but Kevin O'Connell hung him out to dry. Just absolutely dry. It was terrible because he was clearly getting beat up. He was clearly in pain. Now this was a little bit different. Hamstring's a little bit different to tell, and obviously this was just kind of a freak injury. But yeah, no, I think I would have to agree with you. Probably shouldn't have been in the game.
And my thing is, like, to start the fourth quarter, fine, because it's 15 minutes. A lot can happen. You could maybe get a quick score and then turn them over, get another quick score, and all of a sudden, hey, you're down two scores with, about 7 minutes left. And obviously, this year, having the Broncos with two big comebacks against both the Eagles and the Giants with basically not enough time to do it, and they pulled it off both times. I probably incentivized a team like Washington in this situation to consider leaving him out there. However, like you said, he was banged up coming into this game already. The game was already out of hand. It was out of hand at halftime. It was basically out of hand in the quarter. I mean, Sam Darnold was, if there was a way, if he were to win the MVP later in the year, this performance would stamp why Sam Darnold will win potentially the MVP. He has been a top five quarterback all year in terms of consistency and production, and he got them back in the not only in this game but like for the season for the Seahawks aspirations. Like he's got them back in that contending level, but in terms of the Commanders, he got them shot in the foot immediately in this game, and I just think with the way it was going, didn't really make sense for Daniels to be out there anymore. They're already banged up as it is. Deebo Samuel's been hurt half the year. Terry McLaurin's been hurt pretty much all year. Obviously, Austin Eckler got hurt pretty much in the first game, and he's out for the year. So they've had several injuries. Luke McCaffrey got hurt in this game. He's out for the year. Like, it's that type of year for the Commanders in terms of health. And I think all those things factored in, it just made sense to get him out of the game. There was no reason for him to be in this game. It's one of those you throw the towel in, you get ready for next week. Obviously, you want to build some momentum going into next week and maybe get a few scores up, but that wasn't going to happen against a very, very high level Seahawks defense who came once again prepared to play. And ultimately, I think this injury could have easily been avoided.
So, all right. So the only thing I would ask you then is, so I pulled it up. This that drive that he got hurt on, he got hurt around the 7.5 minute mark. That drive started with about 12.5 minutes to go in the fourth. So like it was a long drive. I mean, they had been on the field for a minute. So would you have benched him down 38-7 with 12.5 minutes to go in the fourth? I personally think that's a little early. I don't think you're going to give Marcus Mariota the entire fourth. Now, I mean, we've seen some quarterbacks get pulled. Like Lamar didn't get pulled on this Thursday night against the Dolphins. Even I know the score wasn't necessarily as bad as this, but that game was pretty much a blowout. And he was probably a little more banged up going into this game than Jaden Daniels was. So I think pulling him at 12.5 minutes was a little early. So I mean, the fact that he got hurt with 7.5. I mean, 4 minutes later. I mean, that really is just unfortunate because say they get stuffed here on this drive. Say Jaden Daniels in and say he's stuffed, then you probably pull him after that. But then if he scores, I mean, the Commanders had another drive after that because the Seahawks went 3-and-out. So say Jaden Daniels was the one to score 38-14, would you have sent him out with 4:40 left to go when the next drive started? Down 38-14?
No, because by the time the Seahawks drive ends, there's not going to be enough time for you to not only score 3 times, but you have to get all 3 2-point conversions on top of that, being down 24. So
Yeah.
it's very unlikely. In terms of that drive specifically, I think having him finish the drive probably made sense. And that's what makes this unlucky and a little bit more on the freak injury side of things. But I don't know. I know often QBs are trained and it's put into their brain from a very young age. You don't like lay your arms out like that when you're
Mm-hmm.
getting tackled because that exact thing can happen. So I'm surprised it doesn't happen more, to be honest with you. But I'll be honest, Jaden Daniels is he's built like a twig, man, and I mean that respectfully. But like he wouldn't have that happen probably if he had a little bit more muscle mass. And I know he put on some muscle prior to the season, but it's just the way his body is built. He doesn't really have a lot of. He's built like Chet Holmgren, basically, in terms of like what those guys look like physically. And I think if he would have had a little bit more meat on his bones, like it probably doesn't happen. So ultimately, it was more on the freak side of things. But however, I just think with the way the game went, it was basically over from the start of the game. It didn't really make sense to even like try to do much in the fourth quarter. Obviously, if you're on a really lengthy drive like that, you want them to at least finish the drive. But if, like you said, if you have to factor in health prior to the game and for the week, and we're thinking about that as well, maybe having him, QB run is not the smartest idea when it's 38-7. And this is the other thing. He needs to learn how to slide. He is one of the QBs in the league that slides the least, and it is going to hinder him later in his career. CJ Stroud, although he tries to slide, well, we'll be honest, he doesn't really know how to slide. He basically got killed this past week because he tried to slide, and it was one of those like Madden like half dives that you give when you spam the X button. So both of those QBs have a lot to work on in that department. But yeah, this was a injury that derails their season for sure. They will be picking decently high in the NFL draft this upcoming year. But I'll say tough luck because injuries are part of the game and you can't really avoid injuries. Like, I remember being an Eagles fan, witnessing us for 3 straight years have injuries across the board defensively, completely decimated by injuries. It happened to the receiver core too, and these are Carson Wentz's final years in Philly I'm talking about. But you just have to find a way to, next man up. And that's truly what it is. They do have a quality backup in Marcus Mariota. So I don't think all is lost for their season, but it basically is. I mean, to put it bluntly. So I don't really know what's next for them other than probably preparing for the offseason.
Yeah, the whole injuries thing is kind of tough because you see some teams it doesn't affect. The Browns in 2023 had over 20, I believe it was like 23, 24 guys on IR. They found a way to make the playoffs. The Lions last year had a bunch of guys on IR. I know they kind of flamed out in the playoffs, had higher expectations, but they still got to the playoffs and had that great regular season with all of that happening. So, injuries are definitely a part of it. It just sucks, when it's your young stud quarterback that, kind of shoulders a lot of the load on offense. So yeah, I mean Marcus Mariota is definitely not bad by any means. But yeah, sitting at 3-6 now, third in the division, I would imagine you're really out of the playoffs because the NFC North is going to get at least 2 teams in there. The Bears are 5-3; they're looking good right now. I mean the Panthers have a winning record, and then that's not even talking about the NFC West. You have 3 6-win teams. I mean the NFC West very well could get 3 teams into the playoffs. So things are really looking glim for the Commanders. I mean, but like Marcus Mariota, I feel like is just too good for you to kind of tank it out. Like he's gonna keep you competitive, which honestly, I'm really against tanking. I honestly, I don't really believe in it. It's not in the NFL at least. I don't think it's as common. So I mean, the Commanders might be competitive here and there because Mariota is experienced, but yeah, it's overall just kind of a tough break with how the season was going compared to the expectations they had coming in.
Definitely a tough break. And I am going to now transition with that into someone else who's probably having a tough time right now, and that is Kyler Murray because, man, the Cardinals' offense has looked good with Jacoby Brissett. and I think it's started to intensify the rumbles about, or I should say rumblings, my bad, about Kyler Murray. And is he overrated? Is he overpaid? Should he be their long-term quarterback in Arizona? And I kind of had these suspicions like in the preseason about this is going to be make or break for Kyler. I didn't come out and fully like say that confidently because I wasn't sure, and I thought they would take the next step for their team. I'm very high on the Cardinals. They have a lot of good pieces, but their quarterback, it seems, has held them down for quite some time, and it makes you wonder what's going to happen this offseason. I do think this will probably be the last year Kyler Murray is an Arizona Cardinal.
Well, so I just pulled up Kyler Murray's contract, 5 years, 235 million through 2028. So that's it's a pretty hefty contract. And I know Kyler Murray is talented, but I honestly thought drafting Marvin Harrison was really going to take Kyler's game off because I felt like that was kind of what the Cardinals needed. You know, a big threat on the outside. I thought that would really help the development of Kyler Murray. And I mean, look, the fact of the matter is he's been a little banged up. He's missed some time. But at the end of the day, I think he's just limited as a passer. I mean, and it doesn't know that the Cardinals have had some really tough games. I mean, they're a couple of bad bounces away from being a 4-5 win team. You think if DeMarcado doesn't fumble at the goal line against the Titans, they might hang on to that game, right? Um, but this offense just simply looks better with Jacoby Brissett. I mean, I think we can all agree that I think Brissett fits what they want to do a little bit more. They were really getting under center. First of all, the Cowboys defense is not good. So, I mean, like, it's tough to get a true evaluation on it in that sense because they were able to run the football, that set up play action. That's what Jacoby Brissett is really good at. But I don't think it's a coincidence that Marvin Harrison had a career game. Again, I know he's going against Deron Bland, who is just simply not that good. This Cowboys secondary isn't that good. But Marvin Harrison was open all game, and Brissett was putting it on him. The Cowboys were sending pressure; they were trying to get after him, and he continued to fire dart after dart over to the sideline to Marvin Harrison. So, yeah, I think it's interesting to see this Cardinals offense have success. I believe they put up 28 points against the Colts at Indy. So I mean, they've had good offensive performances. And is it the end of Kyler Murray? I think it's tough. I think this contract is really going to handicap what the Cardinals would do. I mean, so what you think a team would want to trade for Kyler Murray?
I think his market would be robust, similar to how we talked about John Morant earlier this week, and the trade market not being what the team would hope for. I do think, as always, there's going to be more QB opportunities than what will be presented, we presume. So there might be more teams looking for a quarterback. Obviously, the Raiders' game plan with Geno Smith has not worked. I don't think they would again go and trade for Kyler, but you never know. I think for sure it would just make sense for Kyler to be in a Dolphins uniform with all of the speed on their team, and you now add Kyler, but they're not going to be paying Tua and Kyler at the same time. So you really have to look at those teams that have a younger quarterback, also on a smaller deal, that they would feel willing to basically throw the home run ball in on Kyler Murray. A team like maybe the Jets, they only have Justin Fields for one more year, and I think it's not even fully guaranteed next year. So
I
maybe
believe it's
they
around 20. I believe Justin Fields was around 20 million though. So, but I mean, but honestly, that's not as bad compared to some of these other quarterback contracts.
Yeah, 2 years, 40 for Fields. I think only half of that contract was guaranteed, so I think it is a 1 year guarantee. And depending on how he plays, which has been up and down this year, he has that second year as security. But maybe the Jets are, you know what? They say, screw it, we don't like the QBs in this class. We're going to just roll the stopgap QB in Kyler, which I think on that deal, I think this is year 2 of that contract. I don't remember. So he would have 3 or 4 years left on that deal. But maybe it's an opportunity for you to get almost like a long-term stopgap because of the contract. And I think teams are going to learn here shortly to stop giving out these large contracts because they're coming back to bite teams. And we can all thank Deshaun Watson and the Browns for this, because ever since that deal has happened, it's pretty much been a ripple effect in the league. And some of these guys are making an outrageous amount of money that they frankly should not be making. Like Daniel Jones should not have ever been making $30 to $35 million. Now, maybe because of his play, but not before in New York. So I just think I would like to lean on Kyler not being at least the starter. Maybe he'll be in a Cardinals uniform. It'll be a Kirk Cousins situation. He's just a very highly paid backup, and maybe they try to address that in the draft. But I have a hard time comfortably saying Kyler Murray's going to remain with the Cardinals. And, he is only 28. I have seen this all over social media today, but he is only 28. He was the eighth pick in the MLB draft. He was a very
Hmm.
talented baseball player. So, hey, maybe he, if things don't work out, he can go try out the baseball route out for a little bit. But I think that is a back pocketed option for Kyler Murray. I don't think he would ever actually do it, but if things start to crumble on the football side of things, that is an option for him.
Well, I do think it's interesting because we've seen the reclamation project quarterback kind of come to fruition really here this year. I mean, look, Sam Darnold had kind of that bet on himself year, earned himself a really big contract with the Seahawks, and you mentioned him a little bit ago. He is living up to that contract. I mean, he has been worth every penny this season. Daniel Jones, obviously he was a little bit of a cheaper option for the Colts. They just kind of lucked out that he fits their offense and they're able to have some success with him. Even take a look at Mac Jones right now with the 49ers. Brock Purdy's baked up. If they didn't have Mac Jones, where would they be at? Mac Jones is probably going to earn himself a nice little payday going into this offseason. So teams have been willing, I think, now to take chances on a quarterback a second time around. I think the only thing that does make it tough here is, the contract, because you would have to trade for that. And did think that you mentioned a couple of teams that intrigued me. The Dolphins, I don't know. I think they're kind of handcuffed to Tua. The Jets would be interesting, though. Although I think the Dolphins would make sense from a fit perspective, I think the Jets could be interesting because Justin Fields would not be that expensive, and even then, you could have both him and Kyler Murray. Kind of in the same quarterback room, and then you don't need a draft quarterback, so you could roll with those two guys, and you could build on some supporting cast pieces with those early picks that they have in the draft. So I think that could be an interesting strategy. But yeah, I would agree with you. I do think it's hard to say, sit here today and say that Kyler Murray is confidently the starting quarterback for the Cardinals, considering how well Jacoby Brissett has played over these last couple of games.
And not only has he played well, he's distributed the ball evenly across all of their weapons, which, in my opinion, they have a lot of. Michael Wilson, they've had Greg Dortch in the past. I don't believe he's with them anymore. But Marvin Harrison, they've got McBride, obviously. They have a lot of running backs now with James Conner being out. It is very running back by committee, but they're all pretty skilled running backs. And now with Trey Benson out too, that's expanded. So they have a lot of pieces. They've addressed the offensive line. They've tried to the last 2 years. And frankly, I'm going to make the joke, but I think Brissett can just see over the O line better, and he sees a lot more of those windows that maybe Kyler can't get to or see with his eyes. So I just think with the way Brissett has played, he's opened up more of their offense. They can run more play action. He can get it to the outside a lot better than Kyler Murray can. I think they have a long and hard look in the mirror heading into the following years. And it's not like we've never seen a big contract get traded before. Obviously, Carson Wentz, his contract got traded when the Eagles moved towards Jalen Hurts. Jared Goff's contract was traded in terms of getting Matt Stafford to the Rams. So there's a lot of options. And that's another thing, the Rams, Matt Stafford can't play forever. So maybe Sean McVay thinks he can fix Kyler or he could work in their offense and he decides to just bring in a really expensive backup. Because to be honest with you, Matt Stafford has loomed and he's thought about retirement for each of the last two off seasons. So there's no guarantee he doesn't retire this year. And then the Rams are stuck looking for a quarterback. They've had Jimmy Garoppolo as their backup. They have Stetson Bennett. But to be honest, I think I would take Kyler Murray over both of those options. And maybe that's an avenue that the Rams try to pursue as well moving into the end of this season.
Yeah, I think that's kind of interesting. Stafford. The only thing with Stafford, he hasn't shown any signs of slowing down, though. I mean, he's still playing at a very high level. He's still playing like he's in his prime, to be honest. I mean, he is still uh, doing all the right things to have success. Granted, he does have good pieces around him and really good coaching, Sean McVay. But I think Jimmy Garoppolo backing him up, it kind of seems like they're really grooming him to kind of be the heir apparent to that quarterback job, which would kind of make sense because if you think about it, they do play rather similar. Neither guy is super athletic, super mobile, but the arm talent is there. And who knows, a couple of years in that system, you just sit and learn from one of the best quarterbacks of all time. That really could do wonders for you. That could kind of be their reclamation project, right? I know it'd be a little delayed because it feels like Jimmy Garoppolo has been in the league for quite some time now, but I think that could be uh, really a a good option for the Rams, kind of like you laid out.
Also, the Steelers, because Aaron Rodgers has pretty much said this will be his last year. They will need a
Hmm.
quarterback. Don't think they want to roll with Mason Rudolph or whoever it is moving forward. Obviously, they drafted Will Howard, but is Will Howard going to be ready next year to become the starting quarterback, or do they feel more comfortable getting, like we kind of said, a short term, long term type of stopgap and the long term aspect factoring in the contract? So I think there's plenty of options for those teams that have ageless wonders at quarterback who maybe can't play forever, and you have to look in the mirror and think, okay, what are we going to do in the short term? So I think there's a few other options out there than what people may not even realize, to be honest with you. So I think that is a very good possibility in terms of Kyler not being on the Cardinals in the same capacity next season. So either that's being traded, that's being released, or that is being the backup and a very highly paid one. I think that would make him the highest paid backup in the league, surpassing Kirk Cousins' contract, which was already outlandish as it was. So, other than that, I was debating, the whole Joe Burrow thing. Basically, I will save it for later time. It's about Joe Burrow's capabilities in the Bengals offense and outside of the Bengals offense. I'm not going to give away the topic itself, but that will be the gist of the conversation. We will have that conversation next week. Basically, I've become a lot more suspect of Joe Burrow, and Joey's leaning on the side of not being more suspect than Joe Burrow. So we'll now talk about one of the best in my viewing experience as a baseball fan, and now having the growing understanding of baseball, uh, one of the best World Series that we have witnessed, especially since the last decade and a half, for sure. I can't think of many World Series that are up there with this one, outside of the Giants and Royals for sure. Giants and Tigers had its moments, but the stretch of Royals and Giants World Series appearances, the Cardinals when they got theirs with David Freese, like this was probably the best World Series we have witnessed. I will throw a ribbon in there. I will throw a participation trophy in there for Cubs and Indians in 2016 because I personally had a lot of fun watching that series, and also the Nationals World Series in 2019 against the Astros. I felt like that one definitely lived up to the bill as well. So I want to hear your thoughts on the World Series. Obviously, we were both very adamant the Blue Jays would win this thing and prove everybody wrong, but they were not able to finish the job in Game 6 or Game 7.
Yeah, it was just the first Game 7 of the World Series since 2019, so in about 6 years, and it did live up to the hype. And I think me and you both thought the series was over once the Blue Jays went up 3-2. They looked really good. They had beaten Shohei Ohtani on the mound. The only person they couldn't beat was Yamamoto, and you saw he pitched in Game 7, of course. But yeah, I mean, I think when you look at how this series started and just by the time it finished, I mean, you had an 18 inning game. Well, when has that ever happened, right? So you had an 18 inning game. You had competitive games throughout, and ultimately it came down to a do or die game. And I know this Game 7 for the MLB had much higher viewership ratings than Game 7 of the NBA Finals. Now I don't know if that was because everybody had just kind of assumed that the Thunder were going to win the NBA Finals, and maybe they turned it off once Halliburton got hurt because we all kind of knew it was going to be a blowout after that. But yeah, I mean, this series I think was definitely one of the best in recent memory. I mean, I know last year with the Dodgers winning it was just kind of boring, but I don't think it's boring just because the Dodgers won this year. I think it was very entertaining. I mean, and they had to earn it, right? They were down 3-2 with 2 games in Toronto. They had to earn it. I mean, that's just phenomenal stuff. And like everybody brings up the payroll, they paid for the roster. I mean, look, man, they can afford it. They went out and did it. They assembled this great talent. They're putting it all together to win back-to-back World Series. So I mean, they absolutely earn it. It's one of the best teams we've seen in a long time, with arguably the greatest player we've ever seen in Shohei Ohtani. I think that's rather unanimous now after seeing what he's done on the game's biggest stage as well. So, yeah, the Dodgers absolutely deserved it, but I would definitely say one of the best series in recent memory.
I agree with everything that was said. I will also add that, yes, they pay all of these guys. They deferred Shohei's contract. He'll get paid probably to the day he dies because of that contract. But that doesn't mean other teams can't pay. Obviously, There's a lot of various situations looming with teams in terms of cutting their payroll down because they don't feel like they want to be an expensive team. The Brewers do it often. The Rays are infamous for doing it. They do it quite often as well. The Tigers at this point are basically doing that since Mike Ilitch had passed away and ownership went to Chris Ilitch, and they're going to listen to Scooble offers because, frankly, they want to be cheap. So there's a lot of various situations. And when Scooble becomes a Dodgers, when he becomes a Dodger next year or a Yankee or whatever high market supermarket team, people can't complain about it because the team that had him had the opportunity to sign him and give him his due, and they have basically chosen not to do that. So I think that was similar in the Freddie Freeman situation with the Dodgers. Obviously, there were some things that came out after the fact that his agent never got back to him, that the Braves countered the Dodgers offer, and he would have probably gone back to Atlanta. They would have never went and got Matt Olson, and it would have been a huge ripple effect in the league. But there are several instances of these teams not wanting to pay their players. The Angels didn't want to pay Shohei Ohtani, but then they failed to trade him as well. He just walked and went to the Dodgers. Like, all of this comes down to these players know what the Dodgers are capable of. They understand that they're willing to pay, and they want to go there because of the brand, the atmosphere, the prestige, and obviously the consistent winning that that organization provides. So that's why Yamamoto went there. That's why Roki Sasaki went there. That's why they're going to continue to be in these sweepstakes. There's a good chance they sign Kyle Tucker this offseason as well. So the Dodgers won't be done in terms of amassing talent on their team. I just think this World Series proved a point that you can also be in this position. You can also beat this team, but you have to be willing to spend your money, which all these owners have. They just choose not to do it all the time. So we see it in the NFL sometimes, we see it in the NBA sometimes, but we never see it on the level that we see it in baseball with these teams and remaining cheap. And I really thought the Blue Jays, like you said, had it as well. They had hit off of every pitcher in the series except Yamamoto. He was literally I think he, with this postseason and especially this World Series, he might have just solidified himself as the best right-handed pitcher in baseball. I'm not going to say he's better than Tarek Skubal, but I'm very confident in saying he's probably the number two pitcher in all of the MLB, except maybe Garrett Crochet. But that is probably the lone guy, other than obviously Paul Skeens, that like I'm going to take Yamamoto over. So like Skubal, Skeens, Yamamoto, that is for sure the top three. But after that, maybe there's a little bit of a drop off. But he did some exceptional things, never before seen things. Obviously, Madison Bumgarner has come in relief for a World Series and clinched one for the Giants against the Royals. And Yamamoto basically did the same thing. But Bumgarner pitched in 2 games, Yamamoto pitched in 3 games. And he had 100 plus pitches in at least one of those games. So the way he was able to shut down that offense was really impressive to watch. And as that game just kept going on and on and on, I felt like it was going to lean Dodgers because the Blue Jays, they were up all of Game 7. They were up for a portion of Game 6 as well, but primarily Game 7. They did everything they needed to win that game. They just did not get the job done in those final few innings. It went to extras. And at the end of the day, you just have to credit the Dodgers because they remained resilient. They outlasted the other team and they ultimately prevailed. So the Blue Jays had their opportunities, but they weren't able to get it done. They weren't able to execute when it mattered most.
Yeah, and when you think about it, the Dodgers, the way they beat them, yeah, you said they were down, and then it was Miguel Rojas coming up big late in the game. Will Smith, I believe, had a couple of big hits. So I mean, it's not even like it was Game 7, Ohtani or Freddie Freeman or Mookie Betts, who, quite frankly, was rather uh, disappointing. Uh, Not even just this series, but really this playoffs. I mean, Mookie Betts, it's kind of been sad to see him, not really being that same productive hitter that he once was, because I'm old enough to remember him on his days with the Red Sox, and he's been a winner, and he's played really good for the Dodgers. I mean, hitting in that 2 spot, but yeah, looking at this game here, I mean, the Blue Jays led all the way up until the ninth inning. They were up 4-3. And then obviously Rojas and then Will Smith hit the home run. So I mean, it's definitely brutal for the Blue Jays. And now I think what's important to note is how do they come out and respond next year, right? I know baseball's a little bit different than other sports, but do you have a little bit of a hangover? Do you have or do you come out with a vengeance? Do you come out, start the season saying, ah, man, we were so close, we're gonna get back there, or do you come out and you start the season the right way, start the season hot, like the way that they did this year, because they were in first place really the entirety of this year with that lineup that they had. Everybody contributed, and you saw it in the postseason. So I'll be intrigued to see how they start next year, but absolutely no reason that the Blue Jays can't be in the same position again.
I agree, and they've had some. There's been some things I've seen in terms of the media outlets talking about this might have been the Blue Jays like one opportunity because their roster is getting much older next year. A lot of their pitching is up there in age. Chris Bassett, Max Scherzer, Bieber is also not the youngest guy in the world, so they're gonna have to address some things on the pitching and bullpen side of things, but offensively they'll keep most of that team intact. They have to handle Bill Bichette this offseason, but for the most part, all those players are still contractually with the Blue Jays, and like you said, there's not a reason they can't be back. I do think they'll have some regression from the batting average perspective because they had, I think, 6 players bat 280 or better for the year, so that's likely to regress, to be honest. But we know what Vlad Guerrero is. We know what Bo Bichette is. We know what Jimenez and Santander can provide. Santander was rather lackluster for them all year, and he dealt with a lot of injuries. But I think if they would have gotten better production from Jimenez and Santander early on and late in the season as well, they wouldn't have been in the position of losing that World Series. They probably win it. So maybe they have a little bit of regrets over the Santander deal. I don't personally think so because it is only year one. But I have high expectations for Vladdy, specifically next year, and I definitely see him as a good value pick for next year's MVP for the American League.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be the same loaded team that they had this past year. I'd imagine they would bring everybody back. It'd be the same lineup. I know they have a lot of their guys under contract. I mean, even guys like Andres Jimenez, who kind of had really, I don't want to say one and done with the Guardians because he was a really good defender. He just the hitting really tailed off in the back end of the contract, so they traded him. Um, because they felt like he wasn't living up to the contract that they gave him. They were quick to pay him, and now he comes over to the Blue Jays and he's coming up clutch. He's a key part to the bottom of their order. So I think it's a huge testament to the coaching staff that the Blue Jays have, and they've been a good team for years now. So yeah, I mean they're going to bring back guys next year. Hopefully Shane Bieber can get back to being healthy. I know he didn't necessarily look like himself throughout his time pitching, but he definitely still look to be a serviceable member of their starting pitching staff. So, and when you think of the top teams in the AL next year, I mean, I think the Blue Jays are or at least should be the favorite to win the AL again over the Yankees.
Yes, I would throw a bone in there for the Mariners. Obviously, if the Tigers address some things in the offseason, I think they can remain in that picture as well. Obviously, they should have never been in the position they were in at the end of the year because they got off to that blazing hot start. But you can't really count out the Tigers. I hate to say this, you can't really count out the Guardians either because they always find a way to linger and stay. I do think we'll get a much better season out of the Royals next year as well. I had high hopes for them. I had high aspirations for what they could do, especially after making the playoffs last year, and they took a big step back. So I would watch out for the Royals as well next year. But there's a lot of good AL teams. Obviously, we know what the Astros are. They basically didn't have Jordan Alvarez for 2/3 of the season this year, and that killed them when it mattered most as well. The Rangers will probably get better. So I think the AL is personally very wide open. The Red Sox were able to recollect themselves and go on a run there at the end of the season after trading Rafael Devers. So and then the Orioles, they were putrid this year, but they'll likely get better. They need to fix their rotation, and we'll see. I mean, I think they're definitely regretting the Kyle Stowers, Connor Norby trade to get Trevor Rogers, but Trevor Rogers proved himself this year, and I think he lived up to that trade. So the AL is wide open. I think there's a lot of opportunity for a lot of different teams, and it won't be easy for the Blue Jays next year. It won't be as easy as it probably would be for the Dodgers in the NL. So that is a World Series recap. We're going to end this one with a debate question that I think is very intriguing. I heard this on, I think, Twitter earlier this week, but um, does Ohio State have five of the top 10 players nationally? And then, secondly, could you argue that they have the top four players in the country? I would lean no on that one, but I want to hear your thoughts on both questions.
Yeah, I think I would say no to having the top four, but I do think they have the top two. And then they have one. They have one on each side of the ball. Obviously, Caleb Downs and Jeremiah Smith. But I mean, Carnell Tate hasn't been far behind. I mean, how many receivers have been better than Carnell Tate this year? Right? Like, I mean, Jordan Tyson comes to mind. Elijah Surratt comes to mind. But I don't think any of them are doing quite what Carnell Tate is on a week in and week out basis. So to answer your original question, do they have five in the top 10? So I really that just kind of comes down to Arvell Reese, where you rank him in the top 10. Um, I mean, he's playing really well. I think you certainly would have an argument for top 20 to 15. Top 10, I mean, you'd have to think about who else you put in there. So, obviously, in no particular order, Julian Sain, Caleb Downs, Carnell Tate, and Jeremiah Smith. If you count those four, I mean, who else is better right now in college football overall? Ty Simpson, maybe? Jeremiah Love?
Definitely Jeremiah Love. I think he's fallen under the radar this year with what he's done for Notre
Mm-hmm.
Dame, keeping them afloat as well. I'm going to lean Sayan over Simpson solely because of the efficiency in the passing game. He has very quietly had multiple high level 300-yard games. Ohio State's not typically a team that has a lot of 300-yard passers. JT Barrett didn't do it much. Justin Fields did it at times. CJ Stroud did it at times. Dwayne Haskins did it often. But Dwayne Haskins also threw for like 5,000 yards, I think. So he that was a very air raid era for the end of Urban into the start of Ryan Day for Ohio State. But Sayan has delivered the ball with poise, with confidence, with accuracy, and with a lot of arm strength every time he has made a throw. He made a ridiculous throw to Jeremiah Smith in this last game that was down the field. It was a go ball up the seam, basically beating cover four, which for anybody that doesn't understand football, like cover four, you've got four deep defenders. The two corners are deep. The safeties are deep in this zone. You've got one underneath middle read route, and then you've got the two other routes that typically cover the seams up the sideline. And Jeremiah Smith was able to outrun up the seam a corner and safety, and that's typically a no-no ball that you do not throw at all times. But Sand laid it out and got it over the defense to Jeremiah Smith. He did the same thing with Carnell Tate. So these guys are impossible damn near to defend. And I think that is going to help Ohio State tremendously late in the playoffs when it's, hey, go get a score. Hey, get this first down. Like, you can't really defend those two guys. And I think Carnell Tate's emergence this year has made it even harder to try and bracket or try and double or try and even triple Jeremiah Smith because Carnell Tate is going to eat on the other side. And statistically, he's on pace, if not better than Jeremiah Smith this year because of all the attention that number four draws. So I think Ohio State's offense is lethal. I don't see anybody stopping their offense, but I also don't see anybody scoring more than two or three times on this defense because led by Caleb Downs and led by Arvell Reese, they have two high-level, likely bona fide top 5 to 10 picks in this upcoming NFL draft at the second level and third level of their defense. And I personally would take both of those guys in the top five. Obviously, drafting safety early, drafting linebacker early is usually frowned upon, especially because Arvell Reese is more of a Mike linebacker. He's not necessarily an outside linebacker. He's more in the tackles. He is in the box. He's communicating things, and typically you can get value in those guys later in the draft. Same thing with Caleb Downs at safety. The only safety that has been drafted this high in recent memory was Kyle Hamilton, and he's definitely lived up to that. So this Ohio State team, I think for sure, has easily four of the top five players in the country, maybe the top four. I think Darnell Reese, with the way he's played, is definitely fringe top 10. I don't know how many players I can name off the dome that are going to be better than Arvell Reese. It's hard because you have offensive players and you have defensive players. You have to factor in the impact on both sides of the ball. But Arvell Reese has been like the if there was a most improved player award or a breakout player award in college football, it would go to Arvell Reese.
Yeah, and all of this doesn't even mention Sonny Styles. You could even argue is one of the leaders of the defense, but it's just kind of funny how you have all this raw talent on defense, and then you bring in an NFL defensive coordinator in Matt Patricia, who a lot of people shockingly were not a big fan of this hire. Me at the time, I was like, you know what? I mean, Jim Knowles was really good for what he did here, and he was obviously inheriting a good roster, so I was excited to see what he could do. And you can clearly tell the defenses that they're running are just so complex, and they have some of these teams just in absolute shambles trying to decipher what they're throwing at them defensively. And I think this is why a lot of people, kind of say that they need to see Ohio State do it against better competition because everybody they've played, they have just completely dominated. I mean, even Illinois. Illinois was ranked by the time that Ohio State played them. Ohio State beat them handedly. And really, the closest game they've had was, I would probably say, Washington because it was relatively close in the first half, but then Ohio State kind of pulled away in the second half. I really felt like that was kind of the first time Ohio State had stumbled a little bit. Remember that first half was a little early. I believe they got stuffed in a fourth down. They fumbled a punt. So they gave Washington some opportunities, but this red zone defense is historic, essentially. I mean, there's really no other way to put it. I know it was funny. I kept seeing videos on Twitter of that toss to Katron Allen this past week for Penn State, and he scored, and they were like, "Oh, this is supposed to be that good red zone defense," and I'm like, that touchdown came after a fumble handoff. That game should have been 38-7. I mean, the game very easily could have been more of a blowout. But yeah, Ohio State. I mean, this is what they do, right? They have the top guys every single year. I think it's interesting. Ohio State never has a down year. They continue to reload and reload and reload year in and year out, and it's finally paying off for Ryan Day. I mean, to be honest, the expanded playoff helped him, but this was the point of the expanded playoff. You want the best team at the end of all of it to win it and to earn it and to get there. And Ohio State did that. They went through a really tough gauntlet, essentially. So, yeah, I mean, what Ryan Day and what they're doing at Ohio State is truly remarkable, and that's why I think they're going to win it all again this year. I think they're better than they were last year.
I can't believe I'm agreeing that they are better than last year. I thought it'd be hard to be better than last year, especially with all the talent they lost defensively. Obviously, they retained the most important pieces, being Caleb Downs, Sonny Styles, and the emergence of Arvell Reese, but and Igbinosun as well, because he decided to come back, solidify that corner room. They've got very good production out of those other corners. Jermaine Matthews, who I was hoping to see more of last year, and then also the freshman Devin Sanchez, who will be very promising, and he will take over for Igbinosun when his time ends at Ohio State. But this has been a historically good defense. We have now said that for basically now for sure 2 years. You could argue four though with Ohio State and how good their defense has been, but it seems to just keep getting better and better. And I will raise my hand up and say I apologize to Matt Patricia because I was one of those people that wasn't the highest on the hire. I was a little bit more confident on the Bill O'Brien offensive coordinator side of things than I was the Matt Patricia defensive coordinator side of things, if I'm being completely honest. And then Bill O'Brien left, and I was like, oh, great, now what? And then they go get Matt Patricia. And being an Eagles fan, having experienced recent Matt Patricia, that's why I was very suspect and very questioning of how the fit would be. But he has become fully bought into Columbus, to Ohio State, to being almost like a Vic Fangio type, someone that knows his bread and butter. It's coaching defense, and it doesn't seem like he's going to stop coaching defense or leave Columbus anytime soon. He has enjoyed it. The players have responded to him. They enjoy being in that defense, wreaking havoc all the time. And I just think it's going to be really, really hard to see a team beat Ohio State. And when I say beat Ohio State, I mean beat them clean, not necessarily Ohio State beating themselves. Like straight up, I don't think there's a team in the country that will beat Ohio State this year. And I'm not saying that as an Ohio State fan. I'm saying that as a I watch football, like I understand like where this team is coming from and what they've been through, what they've done this year in comparison to everybody else. It feels like there really is a true just gap between Ohio State and everybody else.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't really see the loss on their schedule outside of the Big Ten championship in Michigan, right? And Michigan is going to be such a tough game for me because not in the sense that it's going to be a tough game to watch, but it's just like you feel like Ohio State is by far and away the better team, as you did last year too. They were at home last year. You feel like Ohio State just has by far the better roster. They're clearly the better team, but for some reason these past couple of years they just haven't been able to get the job done. And honestly, I think you could argue who the better team was. Those years they had JJ McCarthy. So up until 2023, right? Last year, I have no idea what happened last year. I think it was just a bad game plan. It seemed like Ryan Day wanted to really prove himself. Um, and honestly, it kind of felt like James Franklin's game this year against Oregon, right? Like it felt like for Ryan Day, that was the game that they had pounded all year. This is the game that we really prove ourselves. This is where we establish ourselves, and we're going to dominate them up front. We're going to out physical them. Well, they tried to run it at Mason Graham all game. It didn't really work out. Yeah, he turned out to be a top 5 pick in the NFL draft. So I think it was overall just a bad game plan that game. I would like to imagine they would have a much better game plan this game. I know it's going to be at Michigan, so that might be tough, and just the heat of the rivalry might be too much. But I think that's really going to be Ohio State's first big test. The game against Michigan, the Big Ten championship, and then they get to the playoff where if they're undefeated at that point, I don't think anybody's beating them.
Definitely the Michigan game is the one that everybody is going to have circled. And I think sometimes as Ohio State fans, we do get a little bit spoiled. I'm not going to lie to you, just because we got so accustomed to basically whooping on Michigan, to say it in PG terms, for 8 years. And not even just 8 years. Since
More than that. Yeah, more than that.
maybe since we were born, and once the
Yeah.
century turned over and it's been 2000 plus, like, Ohio State has dominated this rivalry, and it has not been close. And they've done a lot of catching up in terms of that all-time series record. Obviously, they've hit a little bit of a slump here the last 4 years, but that is still only half of how many times Ohio State beat Michigan, not once but twice, since 2000. So the only year prior to the last four that Ohio State had even lost to Michigan was the 6-7 interim head coach year, Tattoo Gate. That was the only year, and Ohio State barely lost that game. So they have literally dominated this series. I will continue to say that despite Michigan winning in recent time. That doesn't deflect what's happened since all of you have been born. Both of us have been born. Like, I had never seen a Michigan win against Ohio State until 4 years ago, or however long ago it was, and I never having that experience, knowing how much I despise Michigan, I was a quiet soul for about a week, and then it happened again, and I was a very quiet soul. And then last year happened, and it was like, wow, uh, I don't know anymore. So I'm kind of like you. Like, I don't really know what happened last year. It definitely was exactly as you described it. A oh, we're gonna punch Michigan in the mouth and prove ourselves thing, and like it did not work. Not only were they running at Mason Graham, they're running at Kenneth Grant as well, who is a very good player himself. And Michigan had a lot of dogs on that defense. They've had a lot of dogs on the defense for the last 3 years. This is the first year where I can't definitively say that, and I don't think they have anybody that's going to cover either receiver for Ohio State. And frankly, at some point they're going to have to run the ball in that game, but their run offense has not been very good. So I'm curious to see what wrinkles Ohio State tries to open up that offensive attack in terms of running the football, but they may not have to. They may jump on Michigan, kind of like the 62-39 game some years back that Ohio State had against Michigan. So I'm very fascinated to see what happens in that game. Hopefully the Buckeyes come out on top, but we aren't on the field. We don't have the play sheet either. We can't determine what happens in that game, but I would agree. The Michigan and I mean, I'll give Indiana some credit here. Seem to be the only teams that I think definitely could contend with Ohio State. And Michigan, it's for the rivalry. Indiana, it is because they have been definitively the second best team in the country. And people are going to say A&M or Alabama. I think A&M is gettable. I think A&M is a team that can be beat. They have had a couple of close games, and I still need to see Marcel Reed prove himself from a passing perspective in one of these bigger games. And he'll have a big one at the end of the year against Texas, so we'll see then. But I still have a little bit of some questions on A&M. For Alabama, they have easily played the toughest schedule in the entire country, and I'm not going to dispute that. A lot of those are one-score games. Obviously, they lost that game to Florida State. Everybody wanted Bama at 1 or 2 because of their schedule, but you should be rewarded as equally as you would be decentivized. And in that case, it's losing to an unranked Florida State team who hasn't been good basically since beating Alabama, and putting them at 4 was warranted because of that loss. If they don't have that loss, they are the number 1 team in the country, but they lost that game. So, Ohio State will very likely be deep into the college football playoff, hopefully with a Big Ten championship and a win against Michigan. But I think that's the fascinating part of this era is that we don't put as much stake in this rivalry because there is always the unforeseen circumstance where Ohio State and Michigan could play 2 games in a row if they were both, whatever. Let's say they were both undefeated going into that game, one beats the other. Good chance they play again in the Big Ten championship game. And then if they're both in the playoff, there could be a time that they play 3 times. So obviously, the year we could have potentially got that, Ohio State lost to Georgia and TCU beat Michigan. So there was an opportunity for them to play again, but it did not happen. So I do think there will be a time here soon when both of these teams play 2 or 3 times in the same season, and that'll decentivize the rivalry a little bit. It'll put less maybe eyeballs on it, but I do think in terms of these 2 teams, it'll only increase their hatred for each other, and I think it'll actually intensify the rivalry personally. I know there will be people who think otherwise, but I think it'd be awesome to see them play several times a year.
Yeah, I think so too. And that's really kind of what's kind of sucked about these expanded conferences. Like, yeah, it's fun seeing Ohio State play Oregon, play UCLA, play Washington. Yeah, it's cool. But like, I don't know, Ohio State's not playing Penn State for what, another couple of years now? Like that's almost essentially been a classic Big Ten rivalry at this point, right? I
They
know Ohio
won't
State
play them
has
until
kind of dominated
20.
that rivalry.
Yeah, they won't play them until
2028.
20. Yep.
Yeah, so
So
like and for what? Like I don't know. I think it got to a point where the Big Ten. I think honestly they overexpanded. There was really no need for them to kind of go out west. It makes sense from a business standpoint. Obviously, bigger is better, and I mean at this point it's just going to be the Big Ten and the SEC. They should just form and make 2 leagues and merge. To be honest, that's probably what they should do. But yeah, I mean that's just kind of the sad reality now of these expanded conferences. You're kind of missing out on some of these rivalries.
yes, I think the Big Ten and SEC will have some sort of merger, some sort of super league. They will probably break off from the NCAA. That time will sooner rather than later, actually. But we do miss some of these rivalries. Like the Illinois is not that prestigious. Like it's Illinois and Ohio State. However, it is a rivalry. Ohio State actually doesn't play for very many trophies. I think that's the only one they actually play for. It's not like the Big Ten West when back in the day Wisconsin's playing for like 3 trophies against Minnesota and Michigan, like Michigan State or Michigan, and like Iowa, Minnesota's a big one. Iowa, Nebraska's a big one. The Big Ten West, historically speaking, so those teams that are more in the actual true Midwest of the country. So your Iowas, your Nebraskas, your Minnesotas, your Wisconsins, like they have a lot more on the line than from a trophy like rivalry game than what Ohio State does because when it was the Big Ten East, when it was legends and leaders, even Ohio State's only rivalries were technically Michigan, Illinois, and I guess Penn State. And I'm going to say I guess Penn State because like it's called a rivalry game. I don't see why, um, but it is. I personally think Penn State and Michigan State should play on rivalry week, and they can be rivals because they want to be the rival to everybody else. But all the other teams have bigger rivals, right? Like Michigan has a bigger rival, Ohio State has a bigger rival. Penn State and Michigan State are those next 2 teams that, frankly, they can just play each other. Like I don't really care. So that is kind of the negative to the expanded playoffs or expanded conferences and expanded playoffs. But I think that it opens the door for a lot of those possibilities we talked about with the multiple matches or rematches of the rivalries and what it could look like. So that's all that I have. I'll give you the floor if you have anything left you have to say. But yes, Ohio State will be back probably in the national championship.
Yeah, if I had to put money down on it today, that would kind of be my pick. I mean, we've talked about it a couple of times. They're just probably the most complete team that I have ever seen on a football field. I mean, they could beat you in so many ways. I mean, coming into the year, the big question was Julian Sand. That's been answered. Even now, I think the only question is the running game. And to that, I ask, how much are they going to need it? Like, that was really a part of their identity last year. It's not really the case this year. Their identity is to air it out, and it feels like week in, week out, they continue to unlock the playbook. It does seem like Ryan Day is kind of held back a little bit. I feel like they could be running up these games a lot more if they really wanted, but they've kind of been holding it back. So it's just a testament to him. I think that he has these guys locked in and looking at the bigger picture. So yeah, it's going to get scary down the stretch here for the rest of the country.
Scary indeed. And that'll conclude episode 9 already of Beyond the Box Score. It's been a very fast 9 episodes. Hopefully, we start doing 2 a week now, being in November and heading into December. But that'll do it for this edition of Beyond the Box Score. I'm Trayvon Hastings. With me, as always, Joey Korzanowski. If you're listening and if you got to this point, as always, follow, like, subscribe, share, comment, do whatever it is you do on your various platform you're watching. But we would appreciate the love and support. But with that in mind, have a good one, everybody. Have a good college basketball and college football weekend, NFL weekend, NBA weekend. Everything is back. Very exciting. If you're a hockey fan, go watch hockey. But we'll talk a little bit more college basketball next week. So hopefully some NBA. But other than that, that's it. Have a good one, everybody.